In this video, I'm going to show you how to shoot and edit a moving time lapse using a camera and a gimbal. So let's get right into the video. Hey, what's up? It's Chris from Brooker Films, and yes, in today's video we're talking all about moving time lapses and how we can use a gimbal to capture a really awesome and dynamic looking time lapse. So if you don't already know, a time lapse is a sequence of images taken over a period of time which are then stitched together to create a short video showing the passing of time. So a good example of this is when you see the traffic speeding by, or when you see the clouds speeding by. When you see that sped up footage, that is a time lapse. And the typical approach for a time lapse is to set your camera onto a tripod, dial in all of the settings, and just let the camera do its thing on a static shot. But with the introduction of gimbals and some of the smart features on gimbals, we can now get a bit more fancy with our time lapses and add some panning and tilting to our time lapses. So in order to shoot the time lapse, you first want to find a location with plenty of movement. It's pointless doing a time lapse in somewhere where nothing is moving because there won't be any point of the time lapse. So you want to take photos of the traffic, people walking by, the clouds in the sky. You want something that's going to be moving throughout the frame for the entire duration of the time lapse. And it's really important that you run your time lapse for as long as possible. So you want to be aiming for anywhere between 20 minutes to an hour for one time lapse. This will be sped up to a 5 to 10 second shot depending on how long you shoot for. So in order to shoot this moving time lapse, you first need a digital SLR camera, you need a gimbal, and you need a Timelapse Remote. It's really important that you have all three of these because without any part of this, it's going to be really difficult to do this effect. So let's first start with the camera. You want to get a digital SLR, and rather than shooting in JPEG, you want to shoot in RAW. Shooting in RAW basically gives you more options and more flexibility for color grading. This means you can pull up the shadows or you could pull down the highlights. It essentially gives you more control in the edit. Then you want to change the settings in your camera to manual mode. You don't want any automatic settings because these will change throughout the duration of the time lapse and there will be an ugly flickering in the time lapse. So keep your shutter speed, your aperture, your white balance, keep all of your settings on your camera set to manual. Lock them in at the beginning and keep them the same for the entire duration of the time lapse. It's also really important to note that we're taking photos to make a video. So don't put your camera in video mode, put your camera in stills mode, and we're going to take these stills and turn those into a video. So you've got your camera in RAW, you've got all of your manual settings dialed in. Now you need to mount this onto your gimbal of choice. And my choice is the Feiyutech AK4500. And I love this gimbal because it's got this really awesome built-in time-lapse feature. I know a bunch of other gimbals do the same thing as well, so you don't have to have this exact one to do this effect. But once you've got your gimbal, you want to go ahead and you want to go into the time-lapse section. So that is the auto rotation in my example. You want to go into the time section and set how long you want the time lapse to run for. So you want to set the pan axis and the tilt axis for the same amount of time. So the pan is going to be the left to right movement and the tilt is the up and down movement. You want these to be identical. So I'm going to set both of these to 10 minutes. And when I'm happy with that, I can just come out of this window and go to root. Inside of root, we're going to set our first point, press OK. We're going to set our second point. This is the end point. Press OK. And the gimbal is just going to go ahead and take the amount of time that you set in the time section. So it would be 10 minutes in my example. It's going to go back to that first point. And in 10 minutes, it's going to finish up at that end point. Now, whilst that gimbal's rolling, it's really important that you're taking photos at even intervals. And that is where your time-lapse remote comes in. When you're shooting a normal time-lapse, you can put your camera on the tripod. And if you don't have a time-lapse remote, it's a bit inconvenient, but you can always just press down on the shutter every 5 seconds. But the problem is when you're on a gimbal, pressing that shutter button is going to rock the camera on the gimbal and it's going to shake the camera and it's going to make your image either blurry or it's going to disrupt the motion of the time lapse. So it's really important that you plug a time lapse remote into the camera. You can mount this onto the camera, or if you don't have a mount, you can just let that fall down by the sides of the gimbal. And then on the time-lapse remote, you want to set an interval setting of anywhere between 5 seconds to, let's say, 20 seconds. the longer the interval time, the longer you're going to have to wait for each photo. And let's say you're shooting a 4-second time lapse. That means you're going to have to take 100 photos. So if you're leaving an interval gap of around 20 seconds versus 5 seconds, then it's going to take you 4 times longer to shoot the time lapse with that interval setting. So make sure you set the correct interval setting on the Timelapse Remote, press go on the gimbal, and leave your camera to do its thing for however long you've got it running for. Now, the camera will go ahead, do its thing, the gimbal is going to move, the Timelapse Remote is going to trigger the camera to take the photos at even times, and once that's finished, you just want to turn everything off, grab the card, put it into your computer, and we're going to chuck those into Adobe Lightroom to edit the raw photos. So let's get right into that right now. So once you're inside of Adobe Lightroom, you want to begin by importing your still images. So we'll go to the bottom left corner and select Import. Now you just want to go ahead and navigate to your photos, and you want to make sure that you select all of the still images in the sequence. And once they're all selected, you just press Import. Now you're going to have to let the computer run for a second, get those all imported. And once they're all imported, you want to go to that very first image, go into the Develop tab with that first image selected. And this is where we can go ahead and do our color grading. So when I was taking my photos, I exposed for the sky. I didn't want to lose my highlight detail, so I underexposed the shadows in order to expose the highlights. So I'm just going to begin by increasing the exposure a touch. We'll move down to contrast, increase the contrast a touch. Then I'm going to pull the highlights all the way down to get that highlight detail back. Going to push the shadows a little bit. We'll go down to clarity and increase this a touch. We'll go to vibrance, we'll increase the vibrance. We'll pull that all the way up to around 70. And then I'm happy with the look of that. Of course, if you wanted to add a color grading preset onto your time lapse, then all you have to do is go over to the presets tab and select a preset of your choice. Now, once you're happy with the look of that, we just want to go back into the library tab. You want to select all of the images. So on Mac, that's going to be Command A, or if you're on Windows, that's going to be Control A. Go down to the bottom right and select Sync Settings. Make sure all of these are ticked, press Synchronize, and the computer is going to take a minute to synchronize the color grading across all of those photos. So this means you don't have to grade everything individually. You just grade the first image and everything else has that effect applied to it. So once your computer has pasted this color grading onto all of your images, you want to go ahead, select all of the images, so Command A. We'll go to Export. You want to go down to File Settings and pull this all the way up to 100. This is going to give us maximum export quality. You want to go into your exports and choose a specific folder. And then once you've selected the destination for the exports, you just want to give your computer 5 to 10 minutes to export those images for you. And as soon as those have finished exporting, you want to go over into Adobe Premiere Pro. And this is the program that we're going to use to edit the time lapse and piece all of those images together into one video. Now, once we're inside of Premiere, we want to go ahead and import all of those images. But rather than importing all of the individual images, we want to import all of those images as a video file. So we're going to go into Project, we'll import, go to the first image of the sequence, go down to Options, this is if you're on Mac by the way, and select Image Sequence. This will import all of those images as one image sequence. Press Import, and if we drag that video file onto our timeline, we'll keep the existing settings. You can see we've got this video imported into Premiere. The problem is though, we're super zoomed in at the moment. We're in a 1920 by 1080 composition and the images were taken at around 5000 by 4000 pixels. So we'll select the video, we'll go to Effect Controls, and we'll pull the scale all the way down to around 35-36%. And that's a lot better. And there you go. Once we've adjusted the scale, if we hit playback, you notice we've got this really awesome time lapse right inside of Premiere Pro with a really nice pan from right to left. So there you go. I really hope you enjoyed watching this video, and if you have any questions about this effect or any other effects that you want me to talk about, then just leave me a comment in the comment section below, and I promise I will try my very best to get back to you as soon as possible. Thank you again for watching this video, and I will see you on the next video. See you there.